I'm Paul Pasolka, Ivy Masters Learning Center at ivymasters.com. And today we're going to look at the 15th question from the Linear Digital SAT, Test 1, Module 1, Reading and Writing. The title of the graph reads, always read the title of the graph. You want to see what's going on in the graph? Don't go looking at those answer choices before you understand what's going on in the graph. Title, juvenile plants found growing on bare ground and in patches of vegetation for 5 species. We've got the different 5 species, bare ground versus patches of vegetation. What you might notice is that for every one of the species, there's more plants growing in the patches of vegetation than there are in the bare ground. And then you've got your totals column, and then what's nice is that they give you a percent found in patches of vegetation. So it seems like the juvenile plants grow more in patches of vegetation than they do alone. I suppose this is true of humanity too. We are social creatures. The paragraph says, Alicia Montesinos-Navarro, Isabelle Storer, and Rocio Perez-Barrales recently examined several plots within a diverse plant community in southeast Spain. The research calculated that if individual plants were randomly distributed on this particular landscape, only about 15% would be with other plants in patches of vegetation. So it seems like if they just planted them out, how many would just happen to be in patches of vegetation if they just spread them out evenly? They counted the number of juvenile plants of 5 species growing in patches of vegetation and the number growing alone on bare ground and compared those numbers to what would be expected if the patches were randomly distributed. Based on these results, they claim that plants of these species that grow in close proximity of other plants gain an advantage at an early developmental stage. So, in reality, what happens is a higher percent are, as you can see here, a higher percentage are found alive in patches of vegetation versus in the bare ground. So, the question is, which choice best describes the data from the table that support the researchers' claim? Answer choice A. For all 5 species, less than 75% of juvenile plants were growing in patches of vegetation. What that is emphasizing is how little is grown in patches of vegetation. But notice what it's asking. It's asking to support the researcher's claim. What's the researcher's claim? You always get it in the last sentence. Based on the results, they claim that plants of these species that grow in close proximity to other plants gained an advantage at an early developmental stage. Now, although answer choice A is true, what is emphasized is how few grow in patches of vegetation. But they're claiming it's an advantage. We want to emphasize the opposite, that most of them grow in patches of vegetation. Answer choice B, the species with the greatest number of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was H. Stoechas. Now we could look at H. Stoechas, and the greatest number of, it's not the greatest number of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation. It's 12. It's actually the least. And so it's wrong based on the graph, and also it's not emphasizing what we needed to emphasize. B is doubly wrong. Answer choice C. For T. Libanitis and Moroderi, the percent of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was less than what would be expected if the plants were randomly distributed. Incorrect. Based on the data, only about 15% would be with other plants in patches of vegetation. When? That's if the researchers calculated that if the plants were randomly distributed. So both those percents are up and above, not below. So answer choice C is wrong as well. It's got to be answer choice D, right? So we're looking at D. For each species, the percent of juvenile plants growing in patches of vegetation was substantially higher than what would be expected if the plants were randomly distributed. And once again, we see that the majority of them are in patches of vegetation. If they're randomly distributed, as it says here, only about 15% would be with other plants in the patches of vegetation. D is your correct answer. Thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, click like. You can share it with someone who has trouble cross-referencing these passages in the tables. They are among the most difficult reading comprehension questions on the SAT. If there's any question you'd like to see answered from any official PSAT or SAT or ACT, leave that in the comments. I'd be happy to shoot a video on it. Click subscribe so you don't miss anything, and check out our 1-minute video on TikTok. Have a great day.